Yo, what's going on, residents of the Mysta clan? It is your boy KingTitanX here, back with another video, and you guys already know what's the deal. You guys are here for one thing and one thing only. That is, what if Deku was Starfire's brother? And this series is probably going to be ending soon anyway, so just drop like your what if ideas in the comments below, and we'll think about it. But for right now, let's roll that intro.
Yeah, some days I feel unfazed, like when I'm with my friends with a cup raised. Come Monday, I got a gun raised. Suicidal do a dime till hump day. Then I go right back at it like an automatic. More drinks, more songs, more beats to rap. I need a shrink, I'm gone. More time keeps passing. No watch, no thoughts at all. Just a hat, new era. Wet my P's and those O's. Need a Phillies with the orange and black to feel home. From Citizens Bank back to Camden Yards. It's a tale of two cities, and trust we go hard. Trust we go hard, yes we go hard. You said we go hard, I said we go hard. Rockin' my Bob Cousy, stocking up on the loose. If the lyrics come easy, but the life is a doozy. And yes, I'm choosy, and no, I won't settle, but I still take pop off over that kettle. Cause I'm talking bigger picture, and yes, I'm gonna hit you with the...
Now, when we had last left off, what ended up happening is that Izuku ended up finding Ida, and he was actually able to defeat Stain. On top of that, he was also able to train with his sister for a little while during those internships. Unfortunately, what ended up happening is that Izuku actually ended up, well, going a bit too far with Stain. His sister would have arrived in time right before he would have accidentally killed the man, and she would have basically grabbed him. Izuku would have looked down at his hands and realized what he had done. He would have fallen unconscious right after. And this is basically where we start the video off. You see, Starfire would have taken Izuku back to her place in order for them to talk. Once Izuku actually woke up, Starfire would mention his actions, how he had gone too far with Stain back there. Yes, he was a criminal, but at the same time he was also doing vigilantism, which is an illegal practice here in Japan. He of all people should have known better. Izuku would try to explain that all he was trying to do was save Ida, and Starfire would have completely understood, but if she was not there to stop Izuku, she didn't know how she would be able to really help him afterwards. If he would have actually killed Stain, he would have ended up having that on his record for all they knew. Izuku would have understood where Starfire was coming from, and honestly just sit down. He would submit to Starfire because at the end of the day, Starfire was right. He had to get a better grip on his emotions if he wanted to become a hero. He was one of the strongest people by default. He was an alien, for crying out loud. A very, very strong alien. Starfire was practically stronger than All Might. And the only reason why she wasn't number one was because of, well, she just wasn't as popular as All Might. Sure, she was basically reaching up there, but at the same time, she wasn't able to perform as well when it came on to rescues as Endeavor, and when it came on to All Might, she just wasn't as marketable, you could say. Especially with some of the outfits that she would have ended up wearing over the years. It would have gotten so bad to the point where they literally had to make some rules in order to... No. What ended up happening is that sometimes she would have actually ended up getting fines for some other costumes that she would have worn over the years because of the whole thing with, well, Midnight. With how Midnight was with one of her outfits back in the Vigilantes manga. That sort of spin-off or like backstory manga or whatever you guys want to call it. Basically, Vigilantes is sort of its own thing, but at the same time, it's like a prequel series. But that's enough. That's enough of me rambling. Let's get back to the video. So Starfire would Starfire, everybody knows, was strong. Izuku was her brother, and not only that, but he was pretty strong for his age. He was stronger than Starfire ever was at. He was stronger than Starfire when. Oh my goodness. Basically, it goes like this: Izuku, at his age, was stronger than Starfire was when she was that same age. When she was 16, she wasn't nearly as strong as Izuku, so she already knew that Izuku had a lot of potential. There was a chance that Izuku would end up becoming even stronger than her. And that was a terrifying thought, especially if they could not regulate him down. If they could not regulate his emotions, he could end up causing a lot more harm than good. Izuku would have reflected on his actions for the next couple of days, and they would end up going back to UA not too long later. Izuku would have ended up just acting as if nothing strange had ever happened. More time would just pass by, nothing too important, except for, well, how should we go about this? The final exams. When it came on to the final exams, Izuku would have ended up being paired up with, well, Bakugo. And here's an interesting thing here. Izuku would not actually be fighting All Might in this version of events. Instead, Izuku would actually be going up against his own sister. Starfire had specifically brought herself into UA in order to get that sort of, well, fight. She wanted to really test out Izuku's strength when they were fighting seriously. Those sort of spars were pretty much nothing in comparison. She wanted to know how strong a little brother could genuinely be, especially when it came on to fighting in a group. Basically, how Izuku could communicate with his partner, how fluid he could be with them in a fight against villains, and so on, because that was an extremely important part of being a hero, knowing when to be a good team player. And of course, Bakugo would not be all that willing to work with Izuku at first. Izuku would basically try to pound into Bakugo's head that the only way that they could really win this exercise is if they work together. Izuku was strong on his own, yes, and he probably could take on his sister, but to actually straight up beat her? Yeah, no. Izuku wasn't foolish enough to believe that. He had sparred with his sister many times before. Not once had he ever won. But when it came onto those spars, he was at least close. He was at least close to actually pushing her to the edge. With Bakugo here, he could serve as a good extra push in order to actually finally defeat his sister. Izuku would end up going into Bakugo's mentality. He would try and he would try to phrase his words in a way that would be something Bakugo could agree to, something more along the lines of how if he were able to work with Bakugo and actually defeat Starfire, that would actually look pretty good on Bakugo's record. He was able to take down one of the top heroes, even if they were pretty much holding back here. Izuku mentioned this, and the fact that this would serve as a place for Bakugo to realize his own strengths, see what he's really capable of. Aren't these people supposed to be like his stepping stones or something? He's in UA, for crying out loud. If he doesn't get his act together, then what is he really going to be? Izuku would convince Bakugo here, and they would end up fighting Starfire. They would fight her, and although it was a tough battle, another thing that should be mentioned is that she's not wearing the weights either. It would have been a very tough battle. Izuku was constantly being pushed back, same for Bakugo, but Starfire was still holding back a little, even if she wasn't wearing the weights. Izuku wouldn't have gone at his sister trying to fight her. He would use all of the moves that he learned from her, and she would just continue to counter them. Bakugo would have used this, seeing this as a sort of diversion in order to go at her back. He would try and use his explosions, and although they weren't that strong, they were still able to daze her a little bit, which would give Zuko an opening in order to sucker punch her. He would also go in for a drop kick as well. Bakugo would continue with the onslaught, being able to shoot several explosions at Starfire, temporarily blinding her, meaning that Izuku would have even more of an opportunity in order to get a couple of hits in, and they would eventually also bring in the handcuffs, cuffing her to the ground, well, around the pole, you could say. And that's basically how it would have went. Although Starfire would later admit that she was pretty much acting like a bit of a fool during that battle. She wasn't taking it that seriously. Con- she just wanted to see what Izuku could do. If she if she were genuinely bringing her 100%, everybody would have been dead right now. And that would have brought a chill up the teachers' spines because they genuinely believe this. Even All Might believes this because he's had his encounters with Starfire before. He knows when the girl is bluffing and when she's absolutely serious. Now, the next part of this would. Pretty much the only next part interesting enough to cover is, well, the mountain training arc. That's all I will basically be having for the next part of this What If, because that's pretty much going to be like where I'm ending it for right now. The mountain training arc is going to be a whole another sort of ride, especially with the likes of Blackfire being in this story. So yeah, it is your boy KingTitanX signing out. You guys already know the deal. Remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Subscribe to the Mysta clan. Subscribe to my channel. Yada yada yada. Blah blah blah. It's peace.